Now, there was a whole lot of he said, she said online in regards to that Dead Space 2 remake. And today we're gonna kinda sit down and try to unpack this chain of events and figure out if this game will see the light of day. Up next. What's going on, guys? It's Kalo, and I'm here to give you the lowdown on all things gaming. And if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content. Drop a like on the video, and welcome to the level up. Okay, bear with me today, because this whole Dead Space 2 remake fiasco has been one roller coaster of emotions. So, reports initially came out yesterday from Jeff Grubb that the Dead Space 2 remake that was being worked on by EA Motive had been put on the shelf. Now, Grubb expanded on this matter even more, citing the exact reason as to why this project got canned, and that reason was lackluster sales on the original Dead Space 1 remake. Now, as an apparent result to the cancellation of this game, EA Motive's teams were then apparently moved to an in-development Iron Man game. Now, when this first came out, I was kind of surprised about this, and while I didn't play the Dead Space 1 remake, I did hear good things about it, and only good things. So hearing Dead Space 2 was in development, I figured that's a no-brainer, but then it got canceled, and now I don't know where to go. But it's worth noting, this is where the story started to pick up. In a very rare move by a company like EA, a spokesperson then reached out to IGN to give this here statement. Quote, "We don't normally comment on these rumors, but there is no validity to this story." Now, fans of the Dead Space franchise would think there is still a glimmer of hope for a remake to still be alive. Well, Jeff Grubb responded to this report, and this is what he had to say. Quote, "I give you my permission to believe EA if you want. But when a company says that isn't true, but then they don't specify which story they're talking about, well, yeah, Dead Space 2 was definitely being planned. It had a code name, and they aren't making it now." Alright, so at this point in the story, and especially within IGN's article, they noted that EA Motive apparently never even considered a Dead Space 2 remake. Well, there you have it. Apparently Dead Space 2 wasn't even planned. At this point in all of this, it just seems like one big twisted game of volleyball. So to kind of encapsulate this whole story, at one point, yes, the game was still alive and being worked on. Then 2 hours later, a new report comes out claiming that this isn't the case. And I think with this kind of story specifically, it's more or less up to you on who you want to believe. As for my 2 cents and what I made of this whole story, I do think the concept for a Dead Space 2 remake was floated out there at some point. And I think that's always a given with a franchise like this. But as of today, April 11th, the Dead Space 2 remake is not in development. At the same time, I think this is a project they will pick up sometime down the line. I think this is kind of just all of a matter of right place at the wrong time. I think that's how that phrase is properly used. At this point, I have no clue. But going back to this whole under the radar bit for this whole story, this is all accredited to a focus on that Iron Man game and Battlefield. This leads me to believe that Dead Space 2 is pretty far off from ever being made. I think it's quite clear EA Motive will be very busy with these two franchises. And at the same time, this highlights a major issue within the gaming industry as a whole. Now, sure, seeing these big name superhero games being made is fun. And they're gonna sell, no doubt, based off the IP alone. But because Disney is now licensing out all these IPs to other studios like Star Wars and Marvel, this then leads to a lessening of franchises that originated in gaming or brand new ones that can spawn in. One can even argue that this takes away the creativity that developers have here, because they're essentially given all the tools and guidelines on how to make a story and a game. The developers then just gotta put this all together. And this has been an issue I've shouted into the ether about way before. More specifically, I'm looking at PlayStation here because they are so focused on Spider-Man, but they have franchises like Jak and Daxter and like Sly Cooper that haven't been touched in years. It's why I push so hard for many of these old dormant IPs to make at least some kind of comeback. Mainly because I see the gaming world has ballooned up on all these big franchises like Spider-Man and Star Wars, that we often forget there are franchises within the gaming world that have gotten us to this point. And it's those exact franchises that need this TLC. But with all that being said, I'm gonna pass it off to you guys. Do you guys still have hope for a Dead Space 2 remake? Or are you at the point, much like me, you're just gonna let this story unfold and kinda see where it goes? But that about does it here. I've been K-Lo, I gave you the lowdown on all things gaming, and if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content. Drop a like on the video, and this has been the Level Up.